Hello everyone, Matt from Model Minutes here, and welcome back to the workbench for another unboxing. Today it's the P-51D Mustang from Academy. So join me on the workbench as I get inside the box and see what this kit is like. So starting off on the outside, we can see this image of the P-51D Mustang, or probably what it would have been if it's during the Korean War, would it be an F-51D? Maybe it was just slightly before that. And you can see it taking off, and there's a couple of figures here sitting in their Jeep. I do have a price on here, but we will discuss that a little bit later on. And down the bottom it says glue and paint is not included, and the actual product can be a bit different from the pictures shown on the box, which is something I have experienced from Academy in the past. They have had different decals to represent a paint scheme that you can't actually create on the box. So on the sort of short edge, we've got an item code of 12496 and some dimensions, 54mm in height and 132 in length, but no width. Maybe that's meant to be the width, I don't know, but they haven't made that abundantly clear. And it does say that this is a world-class product of Korea on that end. And it does here on this side of the box indicate that we have a ground vehicle kit useful for dioramas included. A fully engraved panel line and rivet details are featured, and a highly detailed cockpit and landing gear. But I will take that with a pinch of salt with my previous experience of some Academy kits. But you can see we've got some images here of a version of this kit built up, particularly the same version as on the front of the box. And there's a little vehicle there, a little Jeep. So yes, suitable for a diorama, and we have the same on this side, and then some information in different languages as well. So we have a copyright date of 2014, but as is quite typical, a copyright date doesn't always indicate the tooling date. And I can't see a tooling date, doesn't mean there isn't one on the box, but it's possible that Academy haven't put one on, so we will investigate that as we go through. So opening the box, we've got our baggie or bits, and straight off it looks quite nice, but we'll put that to one side. We have our instructions and decals and other bits and pieces. There is this yellow, or there's a few other bits and pieces here. This is a warranty card by the looks of it. We have a hints and tips card here, and we also have something else on this yellow paper. It's a safety warning sheet. Make sure you're cutting off the sprue correctly, etc. Yeah, so help sheets basically in there. So instructions are in a fold out booklet, with extra sheets, and unfortunately it is printed in black and white. I do prefer it when instructions are printed in color because it just makes life so much easier to figure out what you're supposed to be painting. But you can cope with black and white ones, provided of course that when you come to the painting instructions they're not too complicated, because let's face it, how many different shades of grey can you annotate for the various colors? So I would prefer color instructions, but I think I can live with this. So as we start the build, we have various elements of the cockpit interior to do, and we can paint those elements and install other bits and pieces. Then we join our cockpit and our fuselage together, then the wing halves, then drop tanks, and we have a choice of drop tanks and tail surfaces. And what else can we do? We have the option of flaps in a lowered or raised position here at step 6. Looks like we can install our prop at this point, and I think we might have to if we're painting this one, because we have the front of the nose cowling sort of as the mounting point for it. Unlike other brands which have done a smarter way of having it go in at the end, this actually requires it to be glued in, unless of course you don't want it to rotate. Then glue B8 into the nose and then call it a day, and then glue your spinner and prop back in at the end. But if you want it to rotate, you're going to have to do it at this step as they've indicated. Moving on down, it looks like we may have the option to have landing gear raised, which is a simple matter of installing the landing gear covers into the relevant position, because we have to cut them if we're going to do it in the lowered position as shown here. But it doesn't specifically tell you to do that if you want it in the raised position, which is an interesting thing. I would have thought they would have told you to do that, but they haven't. We do have here the cockpit canopy. It comes in two parts, and there's a small part that goes inside the canopy, but it may be possible to display the canopy open if you wanted to, because it comes in the two parts, but again, it doesn't make reference to that. That is the aircraft, not overly complicated, no more difficult it would appear to other brands that I've experienced in this scale. And then we come on to the Jeep, or the light utility vehicle. They're not calling it a Jeep. And here we start off with the chassis and the sort of suspension, add the wheels, add the sort of controls, or is that an engine representation? It's like a representation of something. That goes in there. Yes, so it's like a bit of an engine by the looks of it, because that goes inside the sort of bonnet, or the hood, as the Americans would say. Add our sort of main body, and then the chairs and the other small elements, and then the bonnet goes on. And we could, as with other vehicles of this type, we could display the what's it called, like the windscreen in a protective position, or you can lower it down onto the bonnet, which could be done for like stretcher carrying and things. And a few other small details go on, and that's your vehicle, so not overly complicated. We do have a sprue map, which is always handy just in case you can't find something, and we have a list of the unused parts as well, that we, if you have them left over and you think, why haven't I put them in there, they've mentioned it just so that you know they weren't used. And then we come on to our paint schemes. Well, the first one anyway. So the first one is actually an F-51D from the Republic of Korea Air Force in 1950, which is an overall silver with a number 1. So number 1 is, where's my painting color callouts? Where are they? Oh, they're over here. They're on the extra sheet. 1 is a flat black. So yeah, just come over and make sure you pick the right one. So yeah, this is an overall silver with a flat black nose, and then transfers suitably applied. The light utility vehicle is painted in olive drab all over, apart from the wheels. Relatively straightforward. So we have a second paint scheme included, which is for another F-51D for the Republic of Korea Air Force, which looks to be a very similar paint scheme. The main differences being that there's some text on the nose of this one, whereas on this one there's a number 13, or on that one it's number 18, and there is a different color spinner. The spinner on this one is yellow, and it has a band across the fuselage as well, which this one does not. So maybe visually this one is slightly more interesting because it has a few extra bits and pieces. And there is a third one. So we've got another F-51D. This is a United States Air Force version, and it, again, slightly more interesting. It's got shark's teeth on there. It's got a two-tone sort of spinner, which is blue and what was 4 yellow, I think. Yeah, yellow, blue and yellow. And again, we've got some more interesting transfers. And as mentioned earlier, throughout all of this, it's been an F-51D. So technically, the box should say F-51D, but it doesn't. Because technically, there's no P-51D option. It's an F-51D because they changed it from pursuit to fighter around that sort of time period. But yeah, so let's put those to one side. 3 transfer schemes. Would have preferred the instructions in color, but they don't look too bad as they are. Now we have our decals, and the decals are in this little bag. I have experienced Academy transfers before. I didn't really enjoy them, but I think they were like older style decals. These are slightly more recent. They don't look as thick as the previous ones I've tried from Academy, but they still look a little questionable. So we have a copyright date down here of 2002. So, you know, copyright dates aren't necessarily matching up. So these, I don't think they are that old. I don't think they're over 20 years old, but I just think that these are possibly a reproduction, but, you know, haven't changed the design since then. So the colouring on that is pretty good. You can see there's a bit of a strange outline on the yellow. There is a slight registration issue here on number 9. The blue is ever so slightly proud to the left. The yellow is ever so slightly to the right. So things aren't quite lining up as nicely as I would have liked. Again, another registration issue here. The white underneath the red, it's ever so slightly peeking through where the circle is. So things aren't quite aligning, but it's not terrible. I don't really know much about this transfer sort of sheets sort of style. I would have to maybe pick a scheme I'm not building and then cut some of them out and trial them just to make sure they don't disintegrate. But hopefully they work okay. The printing isn't the best, so you've got some small text sort of stencily type stuff over here. Other manufacturers in this scale, you could effectively have that legible, whereas in this sort of case they're just sort of blobs. So they're not as refined as I've seen from other manufacturers, but I think that they might be okay to use. I think they should apply to the model, but I will have to sort of try when I get to the build. Which now brings us on to the plastic parts contained within a bag, which is always nice to see. And as you can tell, I've not opened this. So this is a brand new experience for me. Oh, and then there's another little clear bag here with some clear parts in it. So let's have a look in there. We have... Clear parts look very nice. They look very nice and clear. We have the front canopy and then the canopy tops, but there's two different ones. One of them is has a more angled shape to it. The other one is more like smooth. This one here is more like tapered. So I believe that obviously there's a different variant that could be built from this kit. However, we only actually need the one annotated in the instructions. The molding is really nice. It looks to be relatively crystal clear. There's a slight scratch on the top of this one here, but it's not too bad. The framework is on the outside, which is nice, and it's not overly proud, but I imagine you could use that for masking or hand painting if you wanted to. So clear parts look okay. Flash is minimal. They don't feel overly greasy. And that brings us on to the sprues, and we have, move that out of the way, we have 1, 2, 3. We have 3. They're almost olivey kind of color to my eye. I don't know if the camera will quite pick that up, but they're a slightly greeny gray. They don't feel massively greasy, which is quite nice. Plastic feels a little flexible, but relatively dense. And the mold quality is really quite nice. So we'll start off with the one that I've got in my hand. Molding seems to be really quite nice. Nothing really in the way of flash. Recessed and raised details. The panel lines are not overly chunky, and we've got some relatively crisp details inside the landing gear bays as well. Some slight subtle rivet details in places. If we move on, we've got our chair, and it has some molded seatbelt representation in there. The wheels look to be pretty nice, but there are ejector pin marks, it looks, on this side here. I don't think that was prototypical, so that's a little bit annoying, because you're going to be able to see them. Moving on, control panel, not too bad. Internal areas of your wings have got the ejector pin marks here, which is better than having them on the outside, like with the wheels. And then tail surfaces and flaps, which you can have in a raised or lower position, depending on your preference, which is quite nice. On this sprue, we have our main fuselage halves, and this looks to be molded to a really nice quality as well. Some rivet details, recessed panel lines, some raised details as well. We've got our drop tanks, our internal sort of cockpit fuselage parts, our landing gear covers, which you need to cut in order to display them in the lowered configuration. We've got a 4-bladed prop, some other drop tanks, landing gear legs. Landing gear legs are a little bit more, I would say, robust than the FX version in the same scale, which is quite good because those ones are quite known for sort of sagging over time. And on the inside, we do actually have some representation of detail inside of the fuselage where the cockpit goes, so that's quite good. We do have some smaller details over here, and they look to be molded to a nice quality as well. I think those are the drop tank mounts. And the drop tank mounts, yeah, the drop tank mounts do need the holes on the bottom drilling out, obviously all the way through, because they've given you the option. If you don't want to have them open, you don't have to. The ejector ports are actually on the guns. They look quite chunky. So yeah, not bad looking kit. We also have the last sprue, which contains all the parts for our light utility vehicle. Again, same kind of deal. Just says 172nd World War II ground vehicle set. Chassis details, suspension, wheels. Again, there's ejector pin marks on the wheels. That's a little bit frustrating. I mean, it looks like a really nice kit, but there are some ejector pins in places. We have an extra machine gun there, and I presume there's a mount there. There it is for the machine gun if you were going to use it. That doesn't look to be too bad of a kit. Relatively simple to construct, I believe. Yeah, not bad. It doesn't look like a bad kit, does it? So let's wrap up. We had, well, 2 sprues of olivey grey plastic for the P-51, 1 sprue for the vehicle, and a clear sprue. Mold quality is pretty decent, nothing in the way of flash. A few little things I've picked out, but nothing major. Primarily, it's those ejector pin marks on the surfaces, which, you know, they shouldn't really be there. They should be hidden somewhere else. We had a set of transfers. Quite a few transfers, but the printing isn't as refined as I've seen from other companies. Registration is a little bit off, and the text for your little stencils could be better. I hope they apply to the model okay, but I would probably need to run a test because I haven't experienced this sort of transfer from Academy recently. We do have our instructions. We've got 3 paint schemes for F-51Ds, and all in black and white. Relatively easy to follow, but I would prefer that to be in color, which in this day and age you would kind of want to see from a model kit, especially if you're paying a premium price. And then we come on to the box artwork, which actually I really do quite like the box artwork. I like that they have included images of the finished kit, which are quite inspirational and give you the opportunity to try and replicate the results. But you know, this isn't necessarily a premium product given the price that you can see on the box. So I paid £8.45, as you can see here, and I've done a little bit of digging online. I'm not entirely sure what the RRP is, but between £8 and £9 seems to be the about right price that most online retailers are selling this for. Bearing in mind, of course, you've got 3 different paint schemes, you've got an aircraft and a vehicle. That's a pretty good price, to be honest. You're getting 2 model kits for the price of 1. A little bit disappointing that we've got no figures. It would be perfect for diorama, but with no figures in there, I would probably have to source some myself and you know, make a suitable base for it, which is what I will probably do. That's the way I think I will go with this kit, is I'll make a little diorama. Not sure which version I'll do, whether I'll do a Korean one or a US Air Force one, but I guess I will decide closer to the time. But yeah, so whilst this looks like a pretty decent tooling, let's talk a little bit about the age. We did have our copyright date on here, if I remember. Yeah, 2014. So that's not a tooling date. We had a 2002 copyright date on the decals. Well, this is actually, as far as I can tell, this may be either a 2014 or a 2020 release. I think there may have been a box artwork change around some point. I only bought this recently, not too long ago, definitely within the last couple of years. So it could either be a 2014 or a 2020 production. However, how old is the tooling? Well, from the information I can find online, the tooling actually dates back to 1993. So it's a little bit older than I was kind of anticipating. So some of those ejector pin marks and things on sort of detail surfaces, you can kind of forgive them a little bit if you knew that this was a 1993 tooling. But if you went into the shop and saw this and thought it was like sort of the same age as other manufacturers who are making modern toolings or more recent toolings, you might be forgiven and thinking, oh, it doesn't look quite as good. But I mean, don't get me wrong, still looks pretty good for a 90s tooling. And it certainly, I think, with the way it looks, would give the Airfix tooling, which is 2010, a run for its money. Naturally, of course, it does blow the Revell P-51D Mustang in 1/72 scale completely out of the water. And with that, I think it's probably time to end this one here. Let me know in the comments what you thought of my review of this kit and if my assessment of it was fair. As always, a big shout out to my Model Club members for the extra support they give the channel. Massive thanks to these guys on screen. If you'd like to join them, take a look at the links in the description to find out how. There are, of course, other ways to help support the channel, but if you'd like to support the channel for free, make sure you subscribe with notifications turned on so you never miss a modelling upload. Last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll see you on the workbench again soon.